Hey internet friends, hope you're all doing great and having a wonderful week. I'm always asking this question, what are we being distracted from? With all the Trump arraignment stuff, the political polarization, the violence and constant divide and conquer, what are we being distracted from? Of course, we're all being distracted from our true purpose for why we're all here, distracted from the spiritual journey and instead focused on the material. But I'm talking about what we're being distracted from in a more tangible sense as it relates to ourselves, our families, our country, and our dollar. Our dollar is both representative of the energy we spend in exchange for it and also representative of the parasite on our country that established itself during a meeting at Jekyll Island in 1913, where the most powerful men in the world conspired to create a central bank in the United States. Not a government institution, but a private one that holds no allegiance to our country or its citizens. To put it very simply, a central bank is a bank that is representative of the entire country, which, according to the official narrative, sets the interest rate to stabilize the currency. It also decides how much money to make and print and controls smaller banks under its banner. A central bank controls the fate of nations, which is really crazy when you sit down and think about it. And think about this day and age where the controllers, I'm saying controllers, the human farmers, the bankers, whatever, the parasites on our country, all they really do is sit down or have their minions sit down in front of a computer and press a button and boom, you've got money. Oops, you don't. You're actually in debt, It is not real in any sense of the word. Like our money is not real, it's created out of nothing, it's backed by nothing. So since 1913, central banks have popped up all across the world, all interconnected, and I think we can safely say they're all ran by the same entity, a common thread. That's one of the reasons why I say globalism is already here, but the media just pretends it's a looming threat. As it stands right now, only about 10 countries are without a central bank, which includes the Isle of Man, Monaco, and Panama. And for a time, the United States has been a leading world power since we had the default currency of the world, the dollar, the petrodollar. But it's really seeming more and more like we're witnessing a huge shift take place after the controlled demolition of our economy in the aftermath of COVID. So are y'all familiar with the acronym BRICS? BRICS. Former Goldman Sachs chief economist Jim O'Neill coined the BRIC acronym back in 2001. I think the S was added in 2010. BRIC stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. BRICS are the emerging leading economies of this whole Great Reset BS that's supposed to dominate the world by 2050. Just last week, a Russian official said the BRICS countries are working on creating a new currency allegedly backed in gold, which economists are interpreting as a sign that the US dollar is losing its place as number one because the US dollar is losing its importance in its role in trade and exchange and the exchange of oil and purchase of oil. And the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, says its share of the world's foreign exchange reserves has fallen. The U.S. government's spending and borrowing are only possible because the people want dollars. If the demand for the dollar goes down, its value will fall and American prices will go up. In the worst case, it could cause the dollar to fall completely. So I'm going to play for you right now my video from this week about de-dollarization and the parallels between the fall of Rome and right now. The fall of Rome was characterized by multiple plagues that had a huge economic impact. The empire started out with silver coinage, but ended with metal coins painted to give the appearance of silver. Rome itself was built on conquest and on expansion, but over the years it stretched itself too thin, weakening its military. In its final moments, Rome experienced a major cultural decline, ultimately leading to its demise, with the empire crumbling under its own decadence, totally turning its back on its traditional values. But in the end, did the people of Rome know what they were witnessing? Did they know it was really the end? Rome deployed a political tool known as bread and circuses to keep its citizens occupied, happy, entertained, giving free grain to all the people of Rome and providing the people with endless entertainment, like gladiatorial games that basically just kept the people distracted from the whole dumpster fire. And in what I just listed out, can you point to any parallels between the fall of Rome and the current situation in the United States? And no, this video is not intended to be doom and gloom, scare you, encourage you to never leave your house, but let's get real here. I'm recording this on Monday, April 3rd, 2023, and on the docket for this week is, what do we have here? A potential arrest of our former president? No big deal. Meanwhile, our most recent former presidents, who, as far as I can tell, are not getting arrested this week, have gotten our country into wars of conquest, where our country has no business being and has ended up occupying those territories for decades and decades. Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires, comes to mind as I say this. All to keep this war machine churning to feed the beast, the military-industrial complex, and those who profit from death and destruction. And now, World War III is casually spoken about across our 24-hour news cycle like an impending possibility any day now. Meanwhile, our country crumbles before our eyes. Our very infrastructure suffering under the weight of sending billions in foreign aid to countries most of us will never step foot in. And the two things we have that set the United States apart from other countries are our military and the dollar. We spend more on our military than any other country does on theirs, probably because lobbying is legal here, and the military contractors are lining the pockets of politicians. After all, the sons and daughters of politicians and military interests will never be soldiers. So it's not like they're sending their children to die in these wars. But let's talk about the elephant in the room for a second. With all of this hyperinflation we're experiencing on the daily, with all of this banking drama going on, let's talk about our dollar for a moment. The thing we all work so hard for, and they make this so complicated for no reason, so only they can talk about it, right? But our dollar has value on the global stage because it's the default currency of our world. The petrodollar. The petrodollar is like this big game where countries buy and sell oil using US dollars. This game helps the United States keep its money strong and make sure other countries want to buy and use its money. But let's say other countries don't want to play the game anymore. That could definitely cause problems for the United States, because then we don't have a global hegemony and can't use the dollar as a political tool. And that's where we are right now amid the Russia-Ukraine war and this whole geopolitical disaster.
Vladimir Putin announced this week that Russia will begin using the Chinese yuan for international payments instead of the dollar. Saudi Arabia is also in talks with Beijing to do the same thing.
For Saudi Arabia, who has indicated that they're open to this, to say, you know what, we're going to be open to considering other currencies to trade in oil. If that were to happen, there would be a complete implosion of the global economic system, but certainly the American economic system. And if that were to happen, you'd be looking at sky-high inflation, just raging Weimar Republic kind of inflation.
We have arrived at the inevitability of the dethroning of the dollar. On the political stage, we're so seemingly at odds with China and Russia. That whole thing has set the stage for China and Russia to propose a solution for ending dollar dominance, which has been coined, no pun intended, as de-dollarization. Russia is now utilizing its own currency, the ruble, and China's yuan as the petro-yuan in purchasing of oil and trade with other countries. Here's the kicker. Brazil, Latin America's largest economy, signed on for this deal back in February in agreement with China, where they said, okay, instead of using the dollar, the petrodollar, we're going to use the petro-yuan to trade with you. Turkey, Pakistan, India, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and more have signed on to de-dollarize their economy. And the biggest story today, April 3rd, is that Japan is now buying Russian oil, meaning it's de-dollarizing too. Just think about it for a minute. Our dollar is backed in nothing except the confidence to exchange it for goods and services. The parasitic force on our country made sure back when the Federal Reserve was created, and then again in 1971, I think, that our currency wasn't going to be backed by anything tangible like gold or silver. So if the United States loses its grasp on the dollar, it loses its hold as a world power. And the World Economic Forum already told us in its 8 creepy predictions for 2030 that the United States would no longer be a leading world power. Remember? But again, I'm not trying to say this to scare you. I don't have like a flashlight on my face while I'm relaying this information, trying to keep you from sleeping at night. I'm just painting the reality that we all face and telling you that the bread in our bread and circuses was sprayed by Monsanto glyphosate as a desiccant to dry out the wheat. So no wonder we all have gluten intolerance. We live in the upside down world, and we don't have to, and that's what I want us all to remember. We don't have to live under a predatory system in which our government is actively destroying our country. We don't have to live under a system in which our food is poisoned for profit, in which doctors destroy our health because Big Pharma would never bankrupt themselves by making us whole. We don't have to live in a system where media constantly lies to us, censors us, and follows the exact plot of 1984. We don't have to if we're not under the grand illusion. And make no mistake, I'm absolutely 100% pro-America, but I'm not in the sense that I'm for the government. Because I believe the system we have now operates exactly as it should. It's crooked. It isn't broken at all. It's exactly how it was designed. I'm just pro-America in the sense that I'm pro every single one of you. And I believe in our God-given freedoms, and I believe that if enough of us understood the root of the problem, if we weren't distracted by the bread and circuses, that we could, at the very least, get out of the way of the free-falling boulder, and we could totally go the other way and reclaim the country we once knew. You know, the one where we aren't bringing wheelbarrows full of money to the grocery store to buy a loaf of bread in a not-too-distant future. So what do you think, internet friends? You know, I always look forward to reading your comments. Thank you so much for your support of my channel. Thank you so much for watching, for subscribing, for supporting me on Patreon, and for purchasing my book, The Deep State Encyclopedia. Bye.
I'm just a fake silhouette, avoiding every threat. I wanna stay like a silhouette, but I can't do that. No, I can't.
States in the title, this is an encyclopedia that covers so many historical events, censored information. If you were to go to the index, there is an A to Z of virtually any relevant phrase or person or event that comes up when you're looking into conspiracies. But let me paint this scenario. Say, for example, you have a friend or family member that's just waking up, like they're just beginning their journey of questioning the reality that we live in and the corruption that's going on and has been going on for a very, very long time. Instead of sitting them down and trying to explain every little detail and every aspect in like a word vomit kind of way, what you can do now is you can give them this book. For so long I've been thinking to myself, wouldn't it be great if there was a way to put all of these pieces together in one place so that all you'd need to do is to point people in one direction and they could find all of this stuff out for themselves. Because this is the thing as well. In order for someone to wake up properly, they have to want to do the research for themselves and learn at their own pace. You can't forcibly wake someone up, but you can show them the light.
It's finally here. If you like conspiracy theories, if you like hidden history and learning more about secret societies and anything that's hidden, that's suppressed, and you like to uncover the truth and you like to just seek things out for yourself, this book is for you. And all of Grace's content really is for you. My friend, I'm so honored to just call her a friend, really graceful, just dropped her new book. It's called The Deep State Encyclopedia, Exposing the Cabal's Playbook. It's A to Z, and it covers everything. You can't really tell, but sources, like the whole nine. So yeah, I just want to share this with y'all because I feel like it's a must. It's a must to read, so.
I know I just made a video about the parallels between the fall of Rome and the current situation in the United States, but let's zoom in on Weimar Germany and ask the question, is there a link between hyperinflation and cultural decline with an emphasis on gender and sexuality? Does history repeat or does it just rhyme? The Weimar Republic existed in Germany between 1919 and 1933. Right after World War I, which resulted in the fall of the German Empire, from its ashes, the Weimar Republic emerged. You've probably heard me talking about wheelbarrows full of dollars just to buy a loaf of bread. This is a reference to the final days of the Weimar Republic. You see, things were just fine at first, by some measure at least. Weimar was able to establish a rather successful political system, civil rights, and women were even allowed to vote. Seemingly very progressive for its time, art and culture flourished in the years following the World War, but since all wars are bankers' wars, the same bankers who set up the Federal Reserve in the United States said that with Germany being the loser of World War I, of course, had to pay incredibly high reparations to the Allied powers. So to pay their bills, the Weimar Republic began printing more money, lots of money, and as a result, they went through hyperinflation, causing the amount of money to rise and the value of currency to fall. The prices for goods and services went through the roof, and people's savings almost instantly lost almost all of their value. In 1923, when prices doubled every few days, hyperinflation was at its worst. So that was when people had to carry around wheelbarrows full of money just to buy basic necessities like a loaf of bread. But there were other things going down in Weimar besides the money printer going burr. The modernist movement's pinnacle was actually the Weimar Republic, and it saw unprecedented emphasis on sexuality and gender. Alongside the rise of art, film, and media, Weimar became associated with experimentation and sexuality, with Berlin known as the queer capital of Europe. And there was a booming trans community organizing there, even publishing their own magazines and newspapers. A publication known as The Third Sex circulated in Weimar's final years, encouraging trans people to live their lives without a mask. Pictures were posted of men in drag, dressed up as Cleopatra, and articles were written advocating for equal rights and protection of trans people. There were even fictional contributions, such as the first issue's short tale called Girl Boy, providing advice for parents, coworkers, and neighbors of trans persons. I would say that we're definitely hitting some very Weimar-y notes as of late, particularly with the inflation and printing of money, the devaluing of the dollar, the polarizing politics, and at the center of it all, lately at least, is the transgender issue, the face of which is a character named Dylan Mulvaney, who started out as an actor who made appearances on shows like The Price is Right and starred in Broadway shows like The Book of Mormon. But the pandemic hit, and allegedly Dylan didn't have a creative outlet and was unemployed, so he got on an app that catered to children called TikTok, and then posted a few videos that were unsuccessful. The algorithm didn't promote them, and, they just didn't get very many views. But when he introduced the 365 Days of Girlhood, that's when things popped off. The algorithm, or a bunch of bots, probably paid bots, blew up the numbers for viewership of Dylan basically doing blackface for women. A really insulting caricature of what Dylan perceives women behave like. He's like giggling, crying, dressing up in dresses, getting the nails done, buying designer bags, playing with Barbies, and doing really pedo-y stuff as a grown man, like pretending he's the 6-year-old character in a kid's cartoon. Getting facial feminization surgery, normalizing trans to children who are on the app because the algorithm repeatedly shows it to them all day, every day. And now Bud Light has Dylan's face on their beer can, and the internet can't stop talking about it. And all of this very heated debate about trans rights and all that took place after Christian children and adults were gunned down and murdered in their school by a trans shooter. And without getting into all the details, you know what I think. You already know, y'all. It smells like CIA. It smells like a psyop. It smells like divide and conquer. And it's giving bread and circuses. I'm using TikTok lingo. It's giving final days of Weimar Republic, fighting with strangers on the internet while you're not going to be able to cash in your pension or your 401k in the near future. But it's all designed to distract you from that fact. So to bring this all full circle, I'm going to play you this video I made on Venezuela a few years ago, which I think is timely, and we can draw another comparison to today. Let me know what you think, internet friends. Let me know what you think about de-dollarization, where you stand on this issue, if you think it's happening, if you think it's not happening, what we can do about it, because I want to talk more about that. And yeah, let me know. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, and supporting my channel. And I'll talk to you really soon. Bye. The majority of the coverage of the events taking place in Venezuela, on the American media at least, has been framed as a cautionary tale about the dangers of socialism, resulting in a great deal of the public sentiment being a non-committal shrug, accompanied by an apathetic dismissal sounding something like, well, that's socialism for you. Don't get me wrong, I'm no socialist, but could something else be at play here? In addition to socialism, perhaps other factors that are contributing to Venezuela's economic and political crisis that has been brewing for quite some time? How could a country so rich in natural resources, home of the largest oil reserves in the world, find itself in such a crisis? The Venezuela of today has a population as diverse as its geography, but a good portion of that population has united in protesting the country's high rate of inflation, alongside a scarcity of staple products. They don't want the reputation of living in the country with the highest homicide rates in the world. They want a radical change in their government, and while Venezuelans are pointing at their government is pointing at foreign infiltrators and placing a great deal of blame on them for the disruption. So who's right? Who's wrong? And is it really that simple? The old divide and conquer has been effective in the past, so why would those waging economic warfare on Venezuela cease to utilize it? In these videos, it's hard for me to explain that just because one side is wrong doesn't make the other right, especially in the case of Venezuela, where it's apparent to me that the government is corrupt, but also the protests are infiltrated, and good people are caught up in this. Everyone wants to choose a side. The mainstream media is pushing us to choose a side. I know which side they're wanting us to lean towards, but why don't we choose the side of the people, the citizens? In this video, I'm going to cover some of the oddities about present and past Venezuela. We'll say hello to some familiar players, and hopefully, I'll share with you what the media won't tell you about Venezuela, so you can gain a new perspective, or not. Let's begin. Historically, the value of the Venezuelan dollar has been contingent on its one-trick pony economy, the oil industry. When the Middle East began to export oil in the 1950s, there was more supply than there was demand, and oil prices fell, which affected the economies of all oil-producing nations. So they met up to chit-chat and strategize in 1960, forming what is now OPEC, which was originally created to regulate the supply of oil so the prices would shoot back up and everybody would be happy. And even though oil prices continued to fall throughout the 1970s, war changed all of that. The 1973 Arab-Israeli War led to Arab oil trading companies cutting off trade with the United States and other nations who supported Israel, which was good for Venezuela because their oil prices shot up. But OPEC members didn't keep their original promise. They didn't continue to regulate their supply of oil, and thus the market was flooded with supply, but not enough demand, meaning there were some broke folks in Venezuela when Hugo Chavez came to power. Chavez had some economic success when the new oil demand came from India and China, but he funded social programs with that oil money, which proved to be beneficial in the short term, but not the long term. Overspending meant he borrowed heavily, and as a Catholic who at one time intended to become a priest, he described Jesus as a communist, which I know seems totally off topic, but I'm coming back around. In 2006, Venezuela's relations with the United States and Israel soured as Chavez outspokenly cursed Israel. A couple of years later, during the Israel-Gaza conflict, Venezuela broke all diplomatic ties with Israel, condemning its actions. But here's the real kicker. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Nicolas Maduro, have you heard of him? In 2009, he met with the Palestinian National Authority to establish formal diplomatic relations. And at a rally a year later, Chavez alleged that Israel was financing the Venezuelan opposition. There were even groups of Israeli terrorists of the Mossad who he said were trying to kill him. But the response was that these allegations and accusations were baseless. But that wasn't enough for Chavez. He called Israel a terrorist and murderous state, and he cursed it by saying, "I take this opportunity to condemn again from the bottom of my soul, in my guts, the state of Israel."
Desde el fondo de mi alma y de mis vísceras al Estado de Israel. Maldito seas, Estado de Israel. Maldito sea. Terroristas y asesinos.
Not 1 year later, the United States imposed sanctions against 7 companies, including Venezuela's state oil company, for supporting Iran in the energy sector. And in 2012, in what they said was an attempt to curb the violent crime rates, Venezuela banned private gun ownership. Chavez would never be able to see the full effect of that because he died of cancer at age 58 in 2013. Maduro became his successor, imposing mandatory visas for all U.S. citizens visiting the country. This took place in March of 2015, and curiously, he added that former U.S. President George W. Bush and former Vice President Dick Cheney and Marco Rubio would be denied visas into the country, labeling Bush and Cheney as terrorists. Maduro stated that the travel bans targeted those who violated human rights and bombed villages in Iraq, Syria, and Vietnam. Later that month, Obama declared Venezuela a national security threat, with the White House saying that the new set of targeted sanctions excluded the Venezuelan people and any trade relations with the nation, and are instead specifically aimed at government officials the U.S. accuses of violating human rights. So keep in mind that during this time, Obama was thawing relations with Cuba. Maduro responded on national television, saying that Obama personally decided to take on the task of defeating his government and intervening in Venezuela to control it. Maduro continued to practice some of the same economic strategies as Chavez, creating a climate of corruption where private businesses could not flourish. Not in a country with the highest inflation rates in the world. Oil prices continued to fall. Pieces of paper and coins mean very little if there's nothing to buy from the grocery shelves. And predictably, crime increased, even though Maduro was said to have pledged $47 million towards new disarmament centers. People are angry. They're angry over failed socialist policies instituted by a socialist regime that's seeming more and more like a totalitarian regime as the days pass. And the defenseless population, freshly unarmed, can only get lost in the fray of protest violence as their disconnected ruler dances on TV. So is this a cautionary tale of socialism? Or is this a cautionary tale of what happens when you allow the government to take away your right to defend yourself? Was this the plan for quite some time by those who had their eyes set on Venezuela's natural resources? I know I mentioned Israel earlier, but I don't think that Zionists are the only faction at play here. When you consider that we're talking Latin America under Jesuit rule, I personally think that Rome never fell. The Roman Empire persists even today. Mossad, Jesuits, bankers, they all want a piece of Venezuela. And it looks like the Venezuelan government, despite all its faults, has rejected becoming a member of the Bank of International Settlements. And you know what that means. Look at all the other countries who aren't members. Look what happened to them. Disarming the population, making them line up for a limited supply of food and basic medicine, that's a really effective way to control people. Like I said at the start, good people are caught up in this, and they're furious with Goldman Sachs for buying the country's government bonds last week, which supports the Maduro government and the people's starvation. This isn't just socialism. This is economic warfare. This is destabilizing an economy, and it's been going on for quite some time. And that's what the media won't tell you about Venezuela.
I'm just a fake silhouette, avoiding every threat.